From South Wales to South Shields, lawyers from across England and Wales were back at Parliament Square on Friday, having withdrawn their labour on legal aid cases for the very first time, in protest at the cuts being proposed by Justice Secretary Chris Grayling. And this time it was personal.
Mr Grayling, you've lost our goodwill. You've certainly lost our trust. You have one last chance to avoid being the worst Lord Chancellor since the 19th century. Unless you do change, you will go down in history as that, and you will go down.
In September 2012, Grayling became the first Lord Chancellor with no legal qualifications or experience for over 400 years. With almost all government departments expected to make savings, he quickly announced plans for a reform of legal aid, which had barristers, solicitors and liberty campaigners deeply concerned for the future of access to justice.
We are, the criminal bar, possibly the second oldest profession. We are certainly the most restrained in Britain. For us to take to the streets and close the courts, all cannot be well.
The Parole Board, Her Majesty's Council of Circuit Judges, the Chief Inspector of Prisons and the Joint Committee of Human Rights have all said these cuts are dangerous. But Mr Grayling is not listening.
These cuts aren't necessary, they are not economical, and the evidence suggests that the system is already at collapse. Yet Mr Grayling goes on because he does not care.
The idea of uniting the legal profession had long been considered an impossible dream until the Lord Chancellor achieved consensus among senior lawyers, both real and fictitious, who joined forces to rally outside Parliament against the proposals.
What we want is an unequivocal commitment to overturn any legal aid cuts. Will he give it? Let's find out. Sadiq Khan.
There was a mixed reaction to Grayling's opposite number, Sadiq Khan, after he declined to take up that invite, but his views on the Lord Chancellor met with widespread agreement.
When you have blind ambition plus willful ignorance, you have Chris Grayling.
Khan was joined by legal professionals from all sides of the political spectrum who were there to make their feelings known.
I have been a Conservative for 60 years of my life. As you've heard, for 23 of them I was a Conservative Member of Parliament. And I've come along this morning to say that I am ashamed of this government.
Lawyers' objections to the reforms are many and varied. Defendants will lose the right to choose a trusted solicitor, for example. But uppermost is the fear that with experienced lawyers refusing to work for such low rates of pay, criminal defendants will be left with inexperienced and often unqualified representatives. This will put them at an unfair disadvantage up against more senior lawyers employed by the CPS, a problem best summarised by Janis McKinnon, whose son Gary was saved from extradition to the USA with the help of legal aid funding.
So next time, when someone is in trouble and they walk round to their high street solicitors, they won't be there. They go round the corner to another, they won't be there. So they go into one of the top ones and they say, "How much money have you got?" Say, "Well, I'm not doing very well at the moment. Sorry, I can't help you. But if you go round the corner, there's a guy who doesn't know his arse from his elbow. He'll do it for you."
The government makes two claims in support of the changes. Their first point is that most government departments are facing cuts, and why should legal aid be immune? And on the face of it, the legal aid lawyers might very well seem just like public sector workers in other professions grumbling about pay cuts. The difference is that most other public sectors saw rates of pay gradually improve, even if only in line with inflation, during the boom years of the 1990s and early 2000s. In contrast, legal aid rates and pay scales have been declining in real terms for more than 20 years. So much so that only 15% of the law firms who took on criminal legal aid work in 1998 are still doing so, and the lawyers say that austerity or not, there is simply no more fat to be cut from the bone. Secondly, the Justice Department points out that the total criminal legal aid spend has continued to rise despite the pay cuts. In reality, the cost of legal aid in magistrates' court proceedings has been consistently falling, yet further heavy reductions are still being proposed. It is true that the overall cost of Crown Court legal aid has been rising, but only because, for largely political reasons, more and more cases are being prosecuted. The costs per case have fallen sharply, and more cases doesn't much help lawyers in circumstances where their profit margin is close to zero. The problem the legal aid lawyers have is that many people still see them as fat cats, getting rich through the taxpayer, a card that the government is keen to play, even though the reality is very different, particularly when one takes into account the substantial debt most junior lawyers face after completing their legal training. Indeed, the consistent pay cuts lawyers suffered over 20 years pre-austerity was largely down to legal aid cuts being voter neutral, with just as many people supporting the cuts as opposing, unlike most other public spending cuts which voters fiercely oppose. The lawyers, who ended their rally with a march to the Justice Ministry, may need to change that public perception if they are to turn the tide of opinion against legal aid cuts. If so, they may yet persuade Chris Grayling to think again. If they can't, it seems that a move to a two-tier justice system with access restricted for those unable to afford it will be inevitable.